Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining me this evening. And I'd like to thank Leona. So she's not my assistant, she's the boss. She's actually organizes this whole Empowering Patients program of the last 6 years. So wouldn't be able to do all these talks and presentations without Leona. So thank you again, Leona.
No problem. My pleasure.
Leona's posted a lot of useful resources if you take a look in the chat. So it's usually
Come in now.
Yeah, so coming up in the chat, you can look at some resources from the Burnaby Division of Family Practice. There's a COVID dashboard if you want to look at the latest statistics for our community. And we have a newsletter, kind of an update on COVID every week. So last Friday's is on the chat, but there'll be a new one coming out this Friday as well. And so take a look at the chat while I'm talking, and there'll be times for questions at the end. I'm wondering if anyone has any particular habit they'd like to start, in case they want to be an example case, but most people are kind of shy. But if anyone has wants to share any habit that they want to work on, then we can apply some of these techniques too. But you don't have to, because if Leona has any habits she'd like to start, although she doesn't have any bad habits that I know of.
That'll be a long night, actually.
But I can think of examples if there's no one that wants to be on the spot.
Nothing in the chat yet. Procrastinating, working out. That's mine.
Well, everyone procrastinates at something, and the pandemic was the perfect excuse until they reopen the gyms. So a lot of my patients are happy that they can go back to their gym with distancing and decreased volume limits, but that's been really tough for a lot of us that had really good routines. So one thing that I hadn't done for a whole 2 years since the start of the pandemic is give up my usual exercise routine. So I think most of my patients know that my usual routine used to be to wake up at 5:20, get to the pool, like Bonzer, Island Daily at 6 a.m. as soon as they open, swim my 80 lengths to 2,000 meters, work out in the gym, and then come home, have breakfast with the family, and then off to work and do whatever. But then the pandemic kind of threw a wrench in all of that. And then they canceled the Be Active passes. It didn't seem super safe to go to the pools. But in the new year, just before Christmas, Burnaby's checking for your vaccination status before you enter. And some of the pools, like Bonzer, have really wide lanes. Actually, I shouldn't give this away, otherwise it's going to be a crowded wide lane if everyone shows up at Bonzer tomorrow morning. But sorry, I had to share that. So some of the pools, and Burnaby has been really careful in screening before you get in. And so everyone that's at the pool is vaccinated. But I try to get into a non-crowded lane because even if we are vaccinated, we're still at risk for getting Omicron and passing it on to other people. Although the vaccinations and the boosters do reduce the severity of the illness quite a bit. So they call it relatively mild COVID, but it still feels like a terrible flu to most people. So make sure you get your booster shot when your time comes up, and still be really careful even if you do get your shots and boosters. And if you don't have vaccinations, do be really extra careful and talk to your family doctor if you have questions about vaccines and safety. And I do recommend not just our cloth masks or surgical masks when we're out in public and close to other people or in indoor spaces for a long time, but an N95 mask. So a mask that has better filtration, because we know that the Omicron virus is a lot more tiny and stealthy and can get through these regular surgical masks. And there's lots of different N95s. This is actually the most comfortable one that I could find. So it almost looks like a surgical mask, but it's really tight fitting and it's N95 graded. But there's lots of different more comfortable ones, like the KN95s. So I think we're ready to start. So these are some points on getting rid of bad habits and starting healthy new ones. So some great principles that I've learned in recent years from lots of experts and some leading psychologists. And I'll mention a couple of really good books if you want to do a deep dive into habit formation. So this talk is brought to you by the Burnaby Division of Family Practice. And do check our website, divisionsbc.ca/Burnaby, because all of our empowering patient resources, so all the talks that I've given together with Leona, so all the resources and slides and a lot of the videos for the past year are available to look at online. particularly if your Netflix subscription is getting too expensive, or if you run out of things to watch. I think you will find a couple of good tidbits to improve your personal health. And the reason we started this program through the Burnaby Division is because there's a lot of things that doctors want to share with patients, but don't have time, and the regular visits, 10 or 20 minutes. And there's a lot of things that that you wouldn't get from an unbiased source. So we're not trying to sell you anything, but most of the information that I see on radio, television, on the internet, from doctors or medical information often is biased by someone trying to sell you something. So we've kind of gone through all this material, so more evidence-based material based on science and kind of standard Western medicine. But I do throw in a lot of psychology and the opinions expressed through these talks. Of course, my opinions are not necessarily those of the Burnaby Division of Family Practice, because we all have a big role in improving the health, not only of our individual patients, but everyone in the community. So this is one example of our commitment to all the people that we serve. First of all, what is healthcare? I always start these talks this way because most people talk about the people that wear these masks all the time, even before the pandemic. Doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, physios, allied healthcare providers. We often think about the acute care that we see on Grey's Anatomy and all the other medical shows in prime time. But if you talk to a family doctor, they'll say it's more community care and chronic care and proactive care. Another way of looking at it, the real roots are chronic disease management, proactive care, and your daily habits. So who really provides most of your health care? Is it people like me, your doctor? No, it's actually you. And we're here to support you. And part of the reasons for this talk and the education we provide our patients is to give you the knowledge and support and answer your questions so that you can achieve your goals, not only in terms of your health, but your entire well-being and in your relationships. So I believe that real healthcare is what you do all the time, which is self-care. And you are the one that provides most of your healthcare. So you're the real professionals, even though you don't get paid to do it. You're the expert on your life, and we're there to support you and to connect you to the resources that you need when you need it. And the best predictor of your future health, when we think about those things under your control, are the habits we practice every day. So the topic of today. So the 4 key habits, or the 4 foundations of your self-care, are what you put into your body, what you eat, including some unhealthy things that we might put in, like other drugs, street drugs, cigarettes, alcohol. And then what we do, the second foundation, balancing physical activity and rest. How we feel, emotional well-being, and how we connect, healthy relationships. So the 4 foundations of good self-care: what you eat, what you do, how you connect, and how you feel. So these have both been big topics in our previous Empowering Patients talks, and all the resources and handouts are there for you to review. And we also cover a variety of other topics that kind of support you in relating to healthcare providers, including medical ethics, how to communicate with physicians and other healthcare providers so that you can be your own advocate and get the information you need to make your best healthcare decisions. Today's topic is introducing the keys to positive change, because change is obviously something we've dealt with over the past year, kind of radical changes with climate disasters, excessive heat and deadly heat during the heat waves, our floods, our cold snap, and evolving waves of the pandemic. So things that are really unpredictable. But even without these really unusual global things that have happened, we're always dealing with change. And I'd like you to kind of get that strong feeling that you can be an agent of positive change, that you can adapt to any change that life brings you with support of your loved ones and from us as well. And that you can make positive choices, even in difficult situations like the pandemic. So 4 basic keys are: number 1, choose wisely. Choose your goals and know the reasons behind your goals. Number 2 is to plan well. Creating a specific plan can help you anticipate those challenges ahead. Understand how habits form. So it gives some key tips from some experts on habit formation. And to actually visualize success, because what we focus on, we amplify. So number 1, choose wisely. So ask yourself, what is your goal? So our goal might be to be healthier. That's a great goal, but then we need to fine tune it. What will we specifically do to get healthier? Any specific goals? But it's important to ask why. So again, begin with your values. So I'm gonna just put on a list of common values and just take a glance at it or look at other types of values or lists of values and reflect on what are the most meaningful and important to you. So big list. Examples: authenticity, creativity, friendship, meaningful work, meaningful life, religion, self-respect, service to others. Another way of looking at it, thinking about what your core values are. So to ask ourselves, what values resonate with you? So these slides are available or will be available online on our Empowering Patients site that's within the Burnaby Division of Family Practice. So do take a look and take some time to kind of reflect on your values. I'm not going to read them all out here, but a lot of them might really stand out to you. So those that really appeal to me are compassion, caring for others, our relationships, and feeling connected to my patients, to my community, to others that I work with, and the people that I live with. Kindness and love and gratitude are really important values to me as well as fairness and justice and creativity. So I like to think of health in a different way than we were taught in medical school. So health is not the absence of disease, and it's not necessarily perfect health either. So I think of health as a dynamic balance of the most important areas of your life, and it's a lot of balls to balance, and it's never perfect at any one time. And if it is, it's going to change. That's the nature of life. So we have to kind of balance these important areas of our lives, look at our goals within each of those spheres, and try to achieve our positive potential in life in spite of the challenges, which are inevitable, and really experience a unique purpose and a sense of meaning in our lives. So that's that kind of an ongoing search we do throughout our lifetime. So this is a mandala that I created for myself and share with a lot of people. About 20 years ago, I just kind of drew out the major areas of my life, and at the center would be my calling or my focus. So this is a little mandala that I would put in a private place that I would look at every day, and each day I would consider 2 of these important spheres. So you can see at the very top, rest and play is one important area of my life. And then opposing that would be just work by itself. So the balance between the two, although my work is actually part of my calling as well, it's a vocation. So considering those 2 different spheres and thinking about my goals in each of those, I consider those 2 things on a Monday. On a Tuesday, I think about my spiritual life and also financial things, paying the bills, paying off debts. So kind of 2 opposite poles and spheres, and looking at where I'm at, how am I feeling, what are my particular goals at the time. And then the Wednesday, I might think about my emotional life, managing emotions, how I'm feeling, and my environment, both work and in the community and my neighborhood. Think about those goals in those areas. And then the Thursday, consider intellectual things, the mind, and physical well-being. And then rounding out to Friday, balancing family goals and values with social goals and values. And then the weekend, kind of pondering my calling and my greatest intentions and looking where my focus is. Because so often life can kind of hijack things. When we're busy in school, we might be really focused on getting ahead and studying schools and the next exams and the projects or everything. We might put our relationships on hold, neglect our friends, neglect our family, not think too much about the finances or the future. We might neglect a lot of physical activity as well. So when I'm teaching medical students, I do remind them that it's really important to balance your life, get proper rest, have good relationships, and stay connected with people, even though you're immersed in a huge amount of studying and learning. Because if you can't balance when you're a medical student, you won't be able to balance when you're a physician. So think about these fundamental areas of your life: the social, the spiritual, your family life, your emotional life, your intellectual life, the basics of financial life, your vocation, sense of meaning, your recreation, your environment, and your physical spheres. All these things, just consider them over the course of a week or maybe this weekend. You're going to draw out what your particular goals might be. Because I think true health or well-being is a dynamic, harmonious balance of these spheres. Although it's never perfect because things are always changing, but it's something we work towards. And we want to kind of achieve our potential in each of those spheres. So what are your particular goals in each of them? So in social life, they're just an example. I think it's important to have a sense of belonging and a place in society, in your community, to relate well to others without having excessive conflict. And when there is conflict, to welcome that as a sharing of your different points of view and opinions. To create and have a supportive network of friends, and to enjoy intimate relationships where you can be yourself and speak your truth. In the physical realm, I think it's important to enjoy a well-balanced diet and maintain a healthy body weight. And it doesn't have to be the same kind of body weight as the models that we see on the magazine covers, but what's right for you. I think it's important to exercise regularly, strengthening, flexibility, balance, alignment, and cardiovascular fitness. And to be free of harmful habits, such as smoking, of using drugs or alcohol. And also not to suffer from poorly managed chronic conditions. We all have chronic conditions or will get chronic conditions that we need to manage. So physical well-being is not having them. It's more about having the support and the skills and the knowledge from your physician, other healthcare providers, and your support group to manage them well, so that we can have high blood pressure or heart disease or diabetes, but have some tools so that we have a good feel of what we can do to manage these conditions well and prevent a lot of the complications. When thinking about my environment, I think about being comfortable in my own home, being in a workplace that has not only good physical quality, but good relationships, and not feeling crowded at home or work or at play or when traveling, and to feel a sense of safety in my world. That's kind of my goal for myself, but also the goal for my community. And financial well-being is having an adequate, predictable income, which a lot of people don't have. And I'm really thankful for the primary care networks in Burnaby that have come together. So a lot of community groups and the Burnaby division coming together to support those that have been really affected most during the pandemic, including the homeless and the socially isolated and newcomers to Canada. If you have debt, to have a manageable plan and to have realistic plans for achieving your financial goals, and to have adequate savings, and if you're able, insurance in case of emergencies. And with work, you want the challenge of your work to be matched by the resources and support that you have. Otherwise we get, if the challenge is too low, we're bored. If it's too high, we get stressed and then burnt out. And if it matches perfectly, which sometimes it does, we're in a state of flow. And having work that's consistent with your deepest ethical values, good, honest work. And to enjoy good relationships with the people that you work with and the people that you serve. And some sense of control, that you know your positive actions have predictable positive effects. And in my family life, I like to spend enough time with each member of the family and have a good relationship with each of them. And to derive satisfaction and fulfillment from family life, because that's often, well, we work for. And for the health of the mind, I think about good logical problem solving skills so I can make decisions about vaccines or medical problems with the information that's most up to date. And to use my skills and strengths to work on my weaknesses. We all have them. And to have a flexible point of view, knowing that we all don't have a full picture of the truth, that we're learning over time and we can learn from one another. And to really have that growth mindset. And I think that's one of the keys in what we're talking about today, is that you're not stuck in an old way of thinking or an old way of behaving or being, that we have this huge capability, this superpower that's packed into our brains that we can use to change these things that seem to be hardwired and habitual. And emotional health is about having mutually loving relationships and appreciating the views and feelings of other people, empathy, being aware of your own emotional states and being able to manage challenging emotions. And with the rest and play, getting enough sleep, getting refreshing breaks throughout the day, having activities outside of work that are satisfying and refreshing, and nurturing a sense of creativity in arts, music, or writing, or whatever recharges your battery. And for spiritual goals, to have a sense of purpose in life and a trust in the universe, and a moral compass that kind of guides our own behavior, a code of ethics, and living in accordance with those values. So, and we each at the center have a calling. And I like to draw this out for my own kids and for my patients when they're at a crossroads in career or relationships, to center and discover your calling, which can change throughout life. So your calling or your life's purpose is that intersection, that sweet spot where your talents, what you do best, your passions, what you love to do, and where the needs of the world lie. So that intersection where your talents and passion can meet the needs in front of you and the needs of the world, that's what your calling is. That's your purpose at the moment. So it takes time to discover that, and our calling evolves over time with our changing discoveries and evolving talents and the needs that arise in front of us. So again, setting your goals, considering the important areas of your life, so you're not neglecting anything. And then from those goals, you can choose small little projects that you can turn into new habits, which are basically routine things that you'll do every day. So I've done a lot of quality improvement in healthcare, both in the office and in the hospitals and my organizations. And one thing that they use in organizations to get at the root cause of a problem, for example, if a patient is given the wrong medication and has a bad side effect, we ask, what happened? Why did the patient have this bad side effect? And the first why is, why did it happen? And it was because they were given the wrong medication. You have to ask those whys at least 5 times to get more at the root. So why was the patient given the wrong medication? Well, the nurse misinterpreted the order written by the doctor. And then why did the nurse misinterpret the order by the doctor? Because the handwriting was very messy. And then why was the handwriting messy and confusing? Well, that could go back with the doctor rushing and not taking the time to write properly, but it can be the systems that allow us to use abbreviations or words that can be easily confused. So when big organizations like our health authorities look at the reasons with this root cause analysis, they recognize, well, let's create a systemic change that will get at the root of the problem. Make sure that orders are clearly written or typed, that they're double checked, and there's no ambiguity, and things that are easily confused in handwriting, like decimal points or similar sounding drugs, that we have clarification and have a policy and taught throughout the whole system. So getting at the root. But I like to use the 5 whys in a different way to really uncover the deeper motivations when you have an initial goal. So your goal might be to get an extra job, to start an extra job to save more money. Is the first why. And then why do you want to save more money? So you can buy a fancy car, and then to ask, why do you want to buy a fancy car? It's because you want to impress a particular person that you think will like a fancy car. And then when you go a little bit deeper, you realize that maybe that's not a great value. Why am I spending all that money on a car when there's other more important things to spend money on? Why am I starting an extra job that will take time away from the other important things like my important relationships? So if you ask yourself a few whys, you might get rid of some of those initial goals that don't really fit well with your deeper values. So asking the 5 whys, just like a 2-year-old will when you start answering the questions. So once you know what your deepest values are and what your bigger goals are, the most important thing to put into practice is to create a very specific plan. So try to design a strategy to achieve that goal. So really small, achievable, concrete steps or routines, basically the new habits that we'll talk about, which are kind of incremental positive change, which are steps towards your ultimate goal. So number 1, translate your big goals into little habits. Outline a plan and schedule these stepwise routines. Now, a lot of our habits, we think of the bad habits, and they're kind of unconscious automatic behavior. So they're sometimes hard to get rid of once they become well established. But when we create new habits, they also will become automatic and unconscious. It just takes some time, but it's not simply a matter of putting in 60 days repeatedly. That most of us hear at the beginning of New Year's, that if you practice a habit for 66 consecutive days, it becomes a new habit. Not always. So we'll give you some more tips on making habits or creating habits that stick. Our habits do matter because what we do every day has a cumulative effect on every aspect of our lives. And our habits really define who we are. So if our habit is to smoke or drink every day, that certainly has a cumulative effect in damaging our airways, our arteries, or our liver in the case of alcohol. If we have a habit of speeding, for example, that increases the risk of us getting into an accident or harming pedestrians or other people. So what we do on an everyday increases risk, and it also defines who we are. So I like to think of trying to become the best version of ourselves, but knowing that it is our present selves that create our future selves. So this is a scene taken from a show that's not on anymore called Counterpart. It's about these two parallel universes, and these two characters meet each other, and they have totally different lives because of different choices made at different times. So we can kind of ponder, what would our life be like, and who would you be if you made different choices and fostered different habits? It kind of changes the whole trajectory, like an airplane taking off from one location, but just slightly deviating from the flight path. You'll end up in a totally different hemisphere. So think about your future self and consider your changing self, and recognizing how we've changed over time since. Imagine how much you've changed in the past 10 or 20 years, or how much you've changed since you were a teenager in terms of your attitudes and your knowledge and your skills. But we often underestimate how we change in the future. We kind of think of ourselves in the future, but kind of being the same selves, but maybe a little bit older. So think about how much you've changed and how much you've learned, and consider how much you can change and learn in the future. And as I said, your present self is creating your future self. So let's make choices today and act daily to create the future we'd like to see, and to act as the person we want to become. Because that's one of the key things from Atomic Habits by James Clear, a bestseller from last year, is be the person. So if you want to write, think of yourself as a writer. If you want to be if you want to cook better, think of yourself as a chef. And if you want to master a sport, think of yourself as an athlete. Another quote from James Clear is, every positive action is a vote for the person you want to be. And begin with your end in mind. At the end of life, how would you like to be remembered? And reflecting back on your life, what did your actions say about you? Because those are the actions we're doing today that will speak volumes on who we are in the future and how we'll be remembered. And what do you want for your legacy of the activities and relationships that you're working on right now? So you may have heard of SMART goals. So we started learning about SMART goals when I was involved in, as I still am, with the practice support program with Doctors of BC and GP Services Committee. So teaching our colleagues how to improve the care they give to patients and improve their work lives and to improve particular areas of care, such as chronic disease management. So we learned about SMART goals, and then someone told me that they use smarter goals. So in Burnaby, we came up with SMART test goals so that no one could beat us. But it's just an acronym to remind us the real key things when you're setting up a goal. Because sometimes those goals are too large, or they're too nebulous, or they're not achievable, or they don't really resonate with your real values and deeper goals. And there's specific support you need to actually have really successful achievement of your goals. So S stands for specific. So if your goal is to eat healthier, it's not specific enough. So what particular thing do you want to do to eat healthier? To eat more vegetables? And is there particular vegetables or fruits you'll eat, and how many, and how are you going to do that? So be very specific about your goal. If your goal is to exercise more or to be an athlete, what exactly are you going to do? And how are you going to do it? And what are the details? So to really fine tune it, otherwise it becomes a nebulous goal that's easy to procrastinate. So any goal that you start, you have to have a time that you can schedule it. So S is specific. What are you going to do and where are you going to do it? So if you're going to start exercising, are you going to do it in some of the newly reopened community centers or in a gym? Or are you going to do it outdoors, rain or shine? M is for measurable. So how much and how long are you going to do? Are you going to walk a kilometer or a couple blocks to start with? Or how long will you do your exercise? And it has to be achievable and realistic and doable. Because if the goal is too large, you won't start it. Or you'll start it and get injured. So if your goal is to do the sun run in April, you shouldn't start off by running 10 kilometers if you haven't been running at all, because you'll more likely get injured and exhausted and abandon your goal. So start with smaller goals, like alternating walking a couple of blocks and walking alternating with jogging a few blocks at a time. So just little incremental smaller goals. So tuning it down, making it realistic and doable so that you could do it the very next day is the first step to a realistic goal. R is for relevant. So it has to be important to you and your health and your values. T is for time frame. So when you're going to start and when you're going to finish. Because when we finish, then we can reevaluate what our next step. So E is for evaluate. How did I do with that first step? How did I do with that run, walk, jog? And how did I do eating one apple every day for lunch? And then what did I learn? What were the obstacles and what can I do to make it better? E is for enjoyable, to make sure we make it fun. And we'll talk about how we celebrate after we achieve our goal or do a good positive behavior. S is stepping forward. What am I going to do next? So after I achieve that little goal of walking a couple blocks and jogging another block, what's my next step going to be? So a little bit more jogging, a little bit less walking. How will I do it differently? And if you found that it was pretty lonely, maybe I'll do T together. Who will I work with? Who will I share my goal with? And who will I share my lessons with? So smartest goals that you only get in Burnaby. Everyone else has smart and smarter goals. So I'll talk about the habit loop, which is nicely summarized in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. It's a lot of information, a lot of practical information, but I'm going to distill some of the basics to share with you so you can really put it into practice. So the 4 parts of the loop for any good or bad habit are: number 1, the cue; 2, the craving; 3 is the response or behavior; and 4 is the reward. So I'll walk you through that. So number 1 is the cue. So that's the context or trigger that tells you subconsciously when you're going to do that behavior. For an example, a cue to look at your smartphone and check social media, which is not always such a good habit, might be boredom, or being in an elevator. Everyone takes out their phone because instead of connecting with people in the elevator. Of course, this is pre-pandemic, before people are wearing masks. Or the cue might be TV. Being in front of the TV is the cue to reach for a snack or starting to get hungry. And boredom could be a cue for having a drink or doing other things that are not really good for your health. Number 2 is craving. That's the desire to do that behavior. So an example, you might be craving for junk food when you're watching TV, or for some chocolate when you're bored, or some cigarettes when you're stressed or agitated, or for a drink when you have a break or it's been an exhausting day. So that craving. And then response, the behavior. So either good or bad behavior. So that might be giving in to grabbing a bag of chips or lighting a cigarette. That response, that could be good or bad. And then reward, the immediate positive feedback. So that could be feeling satisfied and full after you've eaten a couple bags of chips. I really think we need to redesign chips so that they turn into big potatoes, so we feel full with just one chip. Because when you look at the label, they just give the calories and the fat for 10 chips, and nobody stops at 10 chips because we're not satisfied by that. So a lot of the behaviors, the cravings that we give into, they satisfy that immediate craving, but only for a moment. And that's unfortunate because that craving will come back and will do that unfortunate behavior again. So the 4 parts. Number 1, the cue, the context or trigger, which tells us subconsciously to tune into that desire or the craving. And we respond unconsciously with just that behavior, good or bad behavior. And then there's an immediate reward that reinforces this habit loop. And it's often a short-term reward in satiation or satisfaction. So if you want to create a good, healthy habit, so you've got your bigger goal aligned with your values, you've tuned it down to a smaller goal, you need to schedule it in during the day where there's a particular cue that makes sense for that particular habit. And that cue has to be really obvious. For example, if my goal is to eat more fruit, eat healthier, and my goal is to eat 5 fruits in a day, then I should put the fruit on top of the television. So it's really obvious, or have it on top of the kitchen table so I'll see it and really easy to access. So make that cue really obvious. Or if your goal is to go for a walk every day after work, then I should put my workout clothes and the runners right at the front door. So it's easy to slip on those runners after I settle down and come back from work. So what can you do about the craving? You can make it more attractive. So try to make the behavior you want to do more desirable. For example, going for exercise is much more attractive if you do it with a friend. Doesn't have to be a super attractive friend. So it shouldn't be kind of another goal you're trying to achieve. But spending time with people you enjoy being with. So I love going to the pool because I can connect with the other regulars that go to the pool. Kind of miss it right now because only a couple of people are swimming in the lane at the same time. But I'm seeing some familiar faces from a couple of years ago, and familiar lifeguards and familiar front staff that are always friendly at our community centers. So it's very inviting to go where you kind of have a home to do your workouts or for your swim. And likewise, if you're walking in a neighborhood that you enjoy, or you can tell yourself that you'll go for your walk, and then you can have a cup of tea on the way home at your favorite place. So pair an action that you want to do, like getting more exercise or eating healthier, with an action you really need to do. So kind of combine the two together so that you're looking forward to doing that. So it makes it more enjoyable. And you can make the behavior easier to do. So tips are, if you want to drink more water rather than other things that are packed with calories, then set up a pitcher that's full of fresh water that you can keep right on your desk with the glass there. Or keep your fridge stocked with fresh fruit, or keep a fresh fruit bowl on the table so it's easy for you to grab a fruit, wash it, and eat it. So that you're removing the friction, so it's really easy to do the new habit. And if you have a new activity you want to do, then have all your gear all set up so you don't have to think about it as soon as you wake up in the morning to go to the pool or go to the gym or go for a walk. So make it as easy as possible. Remove the obstacles. And then finally, the reward. You have to make it satisfying. So some immediate reward. So some tricks are to actually keep a little habit chart so that when you've achieved your goal, then you check it off. So there's lots of apps on our smartphones that give you an incentive for doing activity. So on my phone, I always have these rings that are actually on my watch as well. So yeah, move rings. So I have kind of so many minutes I need to be moving through the day, so I get points for that. So many minutes for exercise, so I kind of set goals, at least 30 minutes of exercise, and most of the time I can achieve it. And a standing goal, making sure I'm standing for at least 10 hours a day. So as the day progresses, I can tell on my watch, which has the connected app, how I'm doing in closing my rings for moving, standing, and exercise. And so a lot of our smart devices are, rather than using it just to look at social media, can give us a lot of incentives and reinforcement when we achieve our little goals every day. And just giving yourself a mental high five for achieving that goal and working out that day or eating each fruit. Make it satisfying, making it immediate, because that does really enforce that feel-good feeling, that sense of achievement. So the 4 keys in that habit loop of cue, craving, response, reward: make it an obvious cue that you can't ignore. Make it a really attractive thing to do so that you increase that craving for the positive thing, and make the behavior really easy. Take away the obstacles, make it really obvious and easy to do. And finally, reward yourself right away, not by doing anything like having a cigarette or a drink or a cupcake, but positive reinforcement with incentives, check off box, and a reward that's pretty immediate rather than waiting to reward yourself after a couple of months or at the end of the week. It's the opposite thing when you want to get rid of bad habits, so you turn it around. So if you know what the cue is for you to give in and have a chocolate bar if you want to give up on that, or to give in on the usual cue for smoking. So sometimes people will smoke or have a drink at a particular time with a particular meal. So one thing you can do is create kind of obstacles so there's something else to do at the same time. Or you might ignore meeting with that particular friend who always wants to offer you a cigarette or a light at that time. So remove the cue or make it less obvious or create some obstacles. Make the activity less attractive. So they tried to do that with putting ugly pictures on cigarette boxes so people know, but sometimes putting reminders or notes to yourself so you remind yourself about the future self or how you look if you continue this activity. Maybe you could use an app that makes you look 20 years older and you don't want to look like that in 5 years. Or you can give a reminder that things that are not healthy for you may take you away from your loved ones or take you away from your favorite activities. So kind of visual reminders that you kind of link to that activity. So instead of making that behavior easy, you make it hard. So don't have any of those snack foods in your home, or lock them away. Or if the TV is the cue to make you drink or smoke or eat things you don't want to eat, then maybe hide the television or put it in another room. Or if the cue is, or if the behavior is something that's hard to do, it's going to be hard to do. So if you have no alcohol in the house, then you can't drink. It's more of an effort. And then the reward, make it less satisfying. So if you want to give up smoking, then make an agreement with your wife or best friend or husband that you'll give them $1 every time you smoke a cigarette, or $5 every time you smoke a cigarette, so that you have a partner that will make it less satisfying for you to do that behavior. So you just turn around these incentives for good habits into for the bad habits to create more obstacles, more friction. And there's another psychologist who wrote a nice book called Tiny Habits, very, very practical. So he presented the ABCs of habit formation. He also has a little website that's kind of nice to look at, because you could try out using Tiny Habits at tinyhabits.com. So I'm not advertising, but I found it really, really useful. And a lot of my patients have tried it out. It's just a little app where you can get some coaching on just creating 3 little tiny habits. So if you think of a little habit you want to do, they kind of guide you through these 3 things, but you can get it right now. So A is for anchor, B is for behavior, and C is for celebration. So the first key is whatever goal you have, make that behavior really tiny, like ridiculously tiny, like so easy to do that it's a no-brainer that you're going to do it without any friction at all. So he gives an example of, he wants to remember to floss his teeth every evening, which we should do. My dad's a dentist, so he taught that to us all the time. Oh, my dad also taught me to behave as if someone is watching you all the time. So he taught me that because one day I finished brushing my teeth and my dad jumped out from behind the shower curtain, fully clothed, but he was just staying there just fine to make sure his kids brushed his teeth, and told me that I didn't finish brushing properly. So from then on, I always brush my teeth, assuming someone might jump out and be watching what I'm doing. So that's how I learned to behave as if someone's watching you all the time. When I told my brother that, he said, "Oh, that's nothing." Dad woke me up one night with a flashlight and said, "You didn't brush your teeth." And then my brother said, and of course I lied. And I said, "Yes, I did." And my dad told him, "No, you didn't. How come your toothbrush is dry?" So my dad taught me to have a good conscience and behave as if someone's watching all the time. So I brush my teeth and floss every night. But BJ Fogg wanted to instill that habit, which we don't all do all the time, by making that behavior so tiny. It's just easy. It's really easy to do. And then you'll be tempted to do the next step. So his goal was to floss just 1 tooth. Pretty easy to do, just takes a second. And then hook it to an anchor. And that obvious anchor is when I'm brushing my teeth before bed, I will brush that 1 tooth, so that you kind of connect the 2 together. So it becomes kind of a habit that you'll repeat over 10 days. So it kind of has to make sense, be in the same place at the same time. And the third key is to celebrate immediately. And they're funny little things you can do. So not just a checkoff box, but just give yourself a high five, do a touchdown dance, say to yourself, "Way to go," give yourself a thumbs up, or applaud yourself, or sing your favorite song. So it sounds really silly, but when you even think about them, it makes you smile. So you want that immediate feel-good feeling, as if your best friend was there giving you a pat on the back, giving you a high five or a thumbs up. So celebrate immediately, internally, and if no one's around in the washroom, no one's behind the shower curtain, you can even do a dance if it's safe to do so and not to slip and fall. So those 3 things, teeny tiny behavior that you're going to hook to something you're already do automatically, like brushing your teeth, and then celebrate immediately. And then you'll find that you're not going to stop at 1 tooth. You're going to probably floss 2 teeth the next day. And maybe even before the 10 days is over, you've flossed all your teeth. But it just makes it so easy. So example, if you're going to start exercising and going to the gym, once you've checked out the gym and following good safety rules, maybe your goal, instead of just working out for an hour, which sounds daunting, would be, I'm just going to put on my shoes and go to the gym. But you'll find that once you do that little step of getting to the gym, first thing in the morning, as soon as they open, that you're not going to just get back in your car and go home after all that bother. You're probably going to stay and work out. And you'll tell yourself we work out for just 5 minutes, and you might work out a little bit longer. So once you remove that friction for that first little step, then you can advance, just like we talked about, reevaluating and stepping ahead when we achieve our smartest little goals first. So give yourself a thumbs up, applause, tell yourself you nailed it. So he creates these tiny little recipes that we can do too. So it would be after I brush my teeth at night, that's the cue or the anchor behavior. I will floss one tooth, that's the BE, the tiny behavior, and celebrate by saying nicely done. That's the celebration, the ABCs. So that anchor behavior, I brush my teeth at night, floss one tooth, and saying nicely done. He gave another habit of doing push-ups. So he wanted to do 100 push-ups a day, but he started off with a tiny recipe of, after I use the washroom, I will get down on the floor and do one push-up, and then I'll give myself a high five for achieving that one push-up. So that's how we started. So it became kind of automatic. Every time you went to the washroom, you do one push-up. And those of you that have prostate problems, you'd be doing a lot of push-ups during that day. But he soon found that so easy that he would do 2 and then 3, and just calibrate and increase that tiny action. So it's still doable, but achievable. So remember those ABCs, the anchor behavior that you already do, closely linked to that really tiny behavior change, followed by an immediate celebration, giving yourself a thumbs up, that feel-good feeling. Nicely done. So you can check out his book from Burnaby Public Library, or you could check out tinyhabits.com if you want to kind of use their little app for 10 days to try out. So that's how you make your, what will be an unconscious habit, initially conscious. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And before you know it, you're your future self. And instead of having regrets, I'd like you to see your future self a year from now, feeling really empowered, having achieved a lot of things and learned a new things. I don't know if you realize, but we have a lot of hardwiring in our brain. So there's a default mode network that every one of us falls into sometime during the day. It's our brain on autopilot when we're not doing anything with a lot of conscious thought. It's kind of when we're daydreaming and we kind of ruminate and think about our life stories and recent events, kind of create this really narrow sense of self. So there's parts of the brain that kind of loop into this default mode network. So it's the default our brain's consciousness and awareness falls into when we're not being mindful or we're not really focused on a particular task. And it's in the default mode that we kind of create these life stories that are only a portion of the truth. And we have a lot of unquestioned assumptions and core beliefs because we're not being really critically active when we're falling into default mode. And we accept a lot of limiting beliefs. So common ones is that you have to be perfect to be loved, or you can't trust anyone, or life is unfair, or life is beyond my control, or that limiting belief that I'm not good enough, that I don't deserve success or happiness or love, or that I'm powerless. So we know these things aren't true about you, but a lot of us talk to ourselves like that all the time, kind of through that default mode network, things we interpreted or experienced in the past. It's kind of reinforcing these negative core beliefs. But we can bring this into the conscious and kind of question these core beliefs when they pop up. Is that really you? And are these thoughts working for you? Do they bring you closer or do they bring you further from your goals, from other people, from your true self, and from the rest of your community? And do your core beliefs foster positive feelings, like love and connection and a sense of peace? And do they foster positive actions like creativity, kindness, and generosity? So I'm gonna come out with my own core beliefs, and you're welcome to share them. But I find these really inform what I do every day. And I know they apply to you as well. So I believe that every one of us, and I am a part of a greater whole, part of a family, and a member of a community, the community of Burnaby, community of people that care about other people, my profession, my vocation. And I, as you do, have a unique potential, a positive potential, and that potential is our duty to discover, and so our duty to help others to discover in themselves. Your special gift, my gift to the world, which is as unique as each of us is. And we each can have a positive impact. We can make a positive difference to other people in our community and to the future of our community with actions that can be great or actions that are small, just small acts of kindness or great acts of love that we're all capable of doing. And I, like you, we're all continually learning and growing, and we can adapt to any change in spite of what the pandemic brings. We can adapt as long as we do it together. So this is really the growth mindset, to realize that you have this potential for learning, for deliberately creating new behaviors that become your new habits. And change is a dirty word to a lot of people, but that's the reality of our lives. We're changing all the time. We're not the same as we were at the beginning of this day, even though our default mode network thinks that we have this static ego that's always the same. We're always growing and changing, but we have potential to have more control and say in which way we're going to grow. So how to engage with life and cope with change. Change is the nature of all things. That's our human nature and being part of the world. We have to accept what we can't change, the reality of the present, and that could be public health rules that we do for the well-being of the whole community and the most vulnerable. Accept our age and the health we are given at this moment. Accept the past that we cannot change, but accept responsibility and recognize the changes that you can do in a positive way for yourself and others and for your community. We can each be an agent of positive change. That means be dynamically responsive to changes and to seek out the positive potential in each moment. So I borrowed this picture from Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to enlist you to be an agent of positive change. So the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. are kind of the bureaucracy and the IT people behind Captain America, Iron Man. They're kind of the organization behind it. So they're regular people like us, except they're super smart and super skilled, and they don't seem to have superpowers, but actually one of them does. So Daisy on the right actually has superpowers, but doesn't realize it till after the first season. And I want you to recognize that every one of us actually has superpowers too. And that's the ability of, we call it metacognition, but that's the ability of using the higher centers of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, to master automatic behavior, understanding how our brain works. We know that we can change how we think, how we behave, and how we relate. So we actually have control of these emotions, where a lot of people feel that their emotions come from the situation and we can't control those emotions. But we have this superpower that most humans don't use all the time because we forget who we really are, that we can actually alter how we think and choose our thoughts. And that there's constructive ways that we can change how we feel. So again, the keys to positive change are to choose the right goal based on your deepest values. So I'd like you to take the time, maybe download the slides from the division website, look at your values. You probably have a good idea, if you're as old as I am, what your values are, but maybe some we haven't visited for a long time. It's good to take a look at it and think about what you love to do when you're a child. And then from those values, create a specific goal and a specific plan, and then use that SMARTEST goals acronym. A specific goal that's measurable, how long you can do it, how much are you going to do, that's achievable, like bite-sized, so you can do it right away tomorrow, that's realistic and relevant to your values in your life, so you can fit it in, and you have to schedule it. And then time-bound, when are you going to do it, when are you going to start, when are you going to reevaluate how you did with this first round of the goal, maybe after a week or a couple of days. And then evaluating what you did, what are you going to do next, stepping ahead, and who are you going to invite on your team to do together with you to strengthen positive change and to share your success. And then we translate those little goals, those little behaviors that we do with the SMARTEST goals into habits with what we've learned about habit formation. So make those little anchor behaviors that you do every day, make those cues for that behavior really, really clear and obvious. Make it more attractive, the thing you're going to do, by pairing it with something else that's enjoyable or see the positive aspects at the same time. You want to make that behavior really easy, like we said, with tiny habits. So really easy to do, remove all the friction and obstacles, make it easy to do. And finally, reward yourself right away with something that is healthy and happy and makes you feel good, like giving yourself a high five. So those are the keys of making those really small behaviors reinforced, and doing that over and over again, not just repetition, but with that reinforcement, with positive reinforcement, positive feeling afterwards. It will become a new goal for you. And then you can work on to the next goal. And that's how we grow. So progressive cycles of positive change based on your values and the needs of the moment and whatever situation you have. And the final key is visualizing success. So I hope you've been thinking about a little behavior, a tiny behavior that you'd like to start in the next couple of days. So I'd like you to kind of reinforce, kind of visualize yourself, seeing that little anchor or cue when you're going to do that behavior, and seeing yourself performing that desired behavior perfectly, and immediate feeling positive feedback, like saying, nailed it, high five, great job after doing it. So trying to think of the behavior you want to do and when you're going to do it the next day or so. And then you can visualize yourself a year from now, the near future, having achieved your goal and made it a routine habit, and kind of reinforce those deeper motivations, your new improved self from that new behavior that you've been doing regularly. Because now you're exercising at the gym every day, or you're meeting regularly with an important friend, or spending the time every day to talk to your siblings or your loved ones or your kids or your partner at home. So let's do a little visualization exercise. So you can close your eyes and imagine yourself in a couple of days from now, certainly less than a week, and see yourself having planned that first action step of your smartest goal, this new routine that you want to start. So you recognize that cue, whatever it might be, that tells you that it's time to do that activity. So that's the anchor behavior that you do all the time. So see yourself recognizing that and experience all that positive feeling of actually doing what you're planning to do, that first little step towards your bigger goal. And it's one small victory, and really feel energized for doing that. So take a moment, just visualize yourself responding to the cue that you've scheduled in, that's obvious, and you know what to do, and you're just doing it, and you're enjoying doing it, and it doesn't take that much effort. And after completing it, you give yourself that high five feeling. And let's try another visualization. So I'd like you to imagine yourself maybe a few months or a year from now, seeing your future self, this new behavior is now a routine. So it might be eating healthy, having 3 healthy meals a day and healthy snacks. It might be a good new exercise routine that you fall into. And you can just see yourself with a sense of pride and achievement, and really feeling that sense of accomplishment and empowerment. Notice where you are in this future time in the year, those positive feelings, physical and emotional, that positive self-talk that you hear. Just make it really real and see yourself. And you can add all your senses as if you're really in that place in the near future. The sounds, the smells, the tastes, the sights, and most importantly, that feel-good feeling that you are capable of making positive change, and that you've turned it into a positive habit that's automatic for you, that you have become your future desired self. And in this future state, kind of reflect with gratitude to your past self for having given your future self this gift, for taking the necessary steps in planning, really connecting with your values, having adapted to ups and downs of the pandemic, and fine-tuned your plans and not giving up, and arriving at new ways of doing and being and most important, new ways of thinking of yourself. Good. So if your eyes are closed, you can open them up now. So what we're engaging in is part of what we learned from the science of neuroplasticity. So it's a fancy term from neuroscience about our ability for our brains to change. So we have hundreds of thoughts every hour, but many of them are the same thoughts all the time. So we do have fall into habits of thought. And of course, we know habits of behavior that are hardwired. And habits are important because when we learn things enough time and reinforce them, then we don't have to think about how to drive the car again or how to ride the bike. We just get on and our body and our brains remember. We don't have to get to know our significant loved ones when we get home at the end of the day. We have a routine of behaving, and hopefully it's a nice, compassionate, loving, open way of behaving. But we fall into habits of behavior that make things a little bit easier. That's how we learn. So we don't have to be so extend so much mental energy all the time. But it works against us when their habits that no longer suit our environment or are no longer healthy for us. So though our habits and thoughts seem to be hardwired with effort and repetition, we can transfer them with our own mind. So that's that ability of metacognition to change our own brains. And your brain, no matter what our age is, has a remarkable ability to learn and adapt. And with deliberate practice, we can learn new ways of thinking and feeling, creating new habits of thought, feeling, and being. So Donald Hebb was the famous Canadian neuropsychologist who coined the term used in neuroplasticity that neurons that fire together wire together. So it is actually quite literal that if you have repeated thoughts and behaviors, the neurons responsible for those thoughts and behaviors strengthen their connections to one another. So they're more prone to have more dendrites or connections with other neurons that are part of that chain that creates that new pathway. And with repeated activity, repetition of those thoughts with reinforcement and clear intention, it's almost as if they become hardwired, just like any of our deepest habits. So that's why we learn, how we learn, and how we create new habits at any time in our life. So it's contrary to what most people think, that they only as smart as they are when they're 19 or 20, and that you start losing neurons after that. Our brains over time, if we continue to stimulate our minds and learn and adapt to changes, actually have more connections than they did when we were 19 or 20. And we're constantly learning, creating new pathways. This is how we adapt. This is what evolution has given us so that we are able to adapt, and why we're still here in spite of climate change, in spite of lots of threats, that we can adapt together. So another principle, in addition to neuroplasticity, that tells us that repeated patterns of thought and behavior are reinforced so they become habits of thought and take less effort to do, is what we focus on, we magnify. This is called the quantum Zeno effect. So it's called attention density. So concentrated attention really solidifies new habits of thought, feeling, and intention. So what we focus on, we amplify. The quantum Zeno effect. So we're all evolving towards our positive potential. Again, that sweet spot, that intersection between your talents, what you've learned that you do best, and if you're young enough, there's probably lots of talents that you haven't discovered yet. So young enough means under age 80, you probably still have new talents that you can explore. And your passion, what you love to do, what you'd like to do for free, what you can do endlessly and have endless energy for. And then the needs of the world. So where your talents, the passion, and the needs of the world intersect is your calling. And I believe there's a positive potential in each of us. There's a positive potential to our lives and a positive potential to be reached in each day, to be open to others, to see the needs of others, to see what we can do. But we just need to see, feel, and act. So I believe that every one of us has a unique positive potential in life, and that it's our duty to realize that potential, because that's your gift to the world, and to help others achieve their gift to the world. And we can all be agents of positive change in our own lives, in our community, and in our world. So Gandhi said, happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. And that's really being attuned to your deepest values. What we talked about at the very beginning. Start with your values, set your goals, turn that to plan, and then turn that plan into achievable small steps and goals using the ABCs of tiny habits and reinforcing and making it easy and achievable. And to paraphrase Gandhi, together let us be the change we wish to see. And to paraphrase myself, see the change you wish to be. So visualize yourself being successful. And really it's us together that will get us through this pandemic and to help all of us, everyone in our community, achieve our positive potential as well. So that's the end of my formal presentation. I hope I've inspired you and give you some practical tips that you can get out tomorrow and explore your goals and values, and to start with that first tiny step linked to some behavior you're doing every day anyway, and to celebrate immediately. Just taking that first step and really holding on to that knowledge that you are an agent of positive change, and use that superpower of metacognition to transform your thoughts and behaviors.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you. We have Craig has asked a question. He said, how important is sleep, and how long should naps be towards creating positive change, emotional balance, and maybe even create a better environment for things like weight loss and better reasoning?
So we used to think that some people don't need any sleep. Like there'd be people like Thomas Alva Edison said that, oh, I get by with no sleep, but he was obviously napping throughout the day and daydreaming and being creative. But we think that most people, actually, most adults still need at least 6.5, 7.5 hours every night. And you know how much sleep you need by how rested you are in the morning during the day. So a lot of people are aware of the symptoms of sleep apnea. That's where you're putting in the hours, but you're not well rested in the morning. And it's because our airway collapses sometimes as we get older for other reasons. It could be our anatomy, and then we're not getting enough oxygen during the nighttime. So if you are falling asleep, if you fell asleep during this presentation, please talk to your doctor and make sure you didn't get sleep apnea. But if you're falling asleep in the middle of the day, like at meetings, falling asleep at traffic lights, very dangerous, do talk to a healthcare professional to make sure that you shouldn't be screened for sleep apnea, because it's definitely treatable. Could be treatable with expensive CPAP machines that blow oxygen into your airway, but there are also some mouth guards that you can use to bring your jaw forward in case that's happening to you. So if you're falling asleep during the day, there could be a medical problem, get it checked out. If you're like most people, especially kids and students, you might be getting by on 5 hours of sleep throughout the week. And then when you have the opportunity during a break or the weekend, then you sleep in all afternoon. And that shows you that you actually are building up a sleep debt that you definitely need more than the few hours of sleep you're getting the regular week. So if you have that sleep debt, then you're gonna need catch-up sleep the next day, but you never really catch up. We need enough sleep so that we can have some good dreams and process all the information. So our brains need that to kind of detox during the night. So it's not just resting the body, it's actually re-energizing, reinvigorating the brain as well. And the unfortunate reality is that as we get older, sleep is a little bit lighter. It's much easier to wake up. And then there's lots of physical things that can get in the way, like bigger prostates can wake us men up during the middle of the night, 3, 4, 5 times during the night. So if you're being awakened by needing to go to the washroom small amounts at a time, see your doctor to check out your prostate. Definitely over age 50, it should be checked out, or talk to your doctor about at least once a year, even during a pandemic. And then naps are not necessarily the best thing to do. If you, it's better to get a good night's sleep, but naps can interfere with falling asleep if it's too late in the day. But we do need to take breaks during the day, so changing our pace. So you shouldn't be doing one thing like driving the Coca-Cola more than 1.5 or 2 hours before you take some kind of a break, a rest break, stretch, not necessarily a cup of coffee, but if you need it, because our brains kind of need that change of pace every 90 or 90 minutes to 2 hours, just to take a little break, not necessarily to go to the washroom, but to change your pace so that you can reinvigorate your brain. So you'll notice that you need those little breaks throughout the day. When you start paying less attention, start yawning, get fidgety, those are indications that you probably have to take a break from that Zoom call and stretch your legs, have a drink of water, or do a mindfulness break. And depending on the stress we have during the day, most of us don't have time to take a nap. I definitely have never had time to take a nap while I'm at the office or at the hospital. We used to sleep in the hospital if we're on call all night, but then we get woken up and we're still kind of groggy. I don't really encourage naps unless you're under 5 years old, and then you can have 2 little naps during the day. That's the way you are. But we have to be cautious about taking naps during the day. On the other hand, my dad's listening. My dad always took naps. He always took naps, even when he was younger than I am right now. So he had such a good life. He would come home. My mom would make him breakfast. He'd go to work, come back at lunchtime. My mom would have breakfast all ready for him. And then he had time to take a little nap on the couch before he went back to work, all refreshed. So it worked well for him to take those little naps. And he seemed to be charged up and doing good work and engaging with people. So, so I'm not anti-nap, but
On the
naps have a
record
place. Yeah, I'm not an anti-napper.
That's cute. Awesome. Well, thank you. Sue has had her hand up for a long time. I apologize, Sue, but she did ask in the chat after a lovely comment to you. What is your take on intermittent fasting? She's planning to start that as a new habit.
It depends on your overall health, so I wouldn't recommend that everyone do it. If someone has certain conditions like diabetes or on certain medications, then they shouldn't fast a long time because then blood sugars could be too low. But it could be totally healthy if you're young and completely healthy, and maybe run it by your physician just to make sure with your overall health. But it depends on your intentions. So if it's intention to lose weight, it can be really effective. And that doesn't mean like not eating for 3 days and then eating one day. Intermittent fasting usually refers to having a window of time where you're not going to eat, maybe just drink water, and then you'll consume all your calories during a particular time of the day. So it kind of makes sense all the time, especially if we tend to snack and eat a lot before we go to sleep, because we're kind of fasting and not doing any activity during the nighttime. But it kind of makes sense for some people maybe to have more of the calories earlier in the day or at lunchtime, and not to be eating so much later in the day or in the evening. So it really depends on your goals and your overall health. When we're young and healthy, maybe in our 20s and 30s, and there's no other conditions going on, and we have reasonable goals that we'd like to achieve, it might be quite appropriate, but not for everybody.
Great, great. Well, John actually made a lovely comment. He said, your presentation was packed full of helpful information, and he's motivated to find a new habit to work on. So he said, thank you for that.
Thank you, John. And if you have a wife, just ask your wife. My wife is full of new habits she'd like to give me.
Here's a big one. Tanja has asked in the chat, how does chemistry work in the brain? So this is the big one.
Oh, neurochemistry. We have neurotransmitters. That's how our neurons kind of connect to each other. So there's electrical signals, but then the neurons are kind of specialized cells that they communicate with each other with neurotransmitters. And you might have heard of some famous neurotransmitters like serotonin. So there's antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications that raise levels of serotonin. They're serotonin reuptake inhibitors so that the level of serotonin rises. And for some people, it makes them feel more calm, less anger, a little bit even. Some people feel a bit flat. It's similar to the effect of mindfully meditating for 20 years. I raised my serotonin by meditating for 20 years. So we can change our neurotransmitters that can alter our mood and our thoughts through physical activity, not just drugs. So exercise raises that positive neurotransmitter, serotonin. Dopamine, the feel-good hormone, increases when we're craving things and rewarding ourselves. So that's why habits are formed. So dopamine goes up when we're reinforcing that feel-good feeling after you achieved your habit. So it's a very relevant question. It is very complex because there's many, many neurotransmitters involved in our behavior. So they're actually hormones that are produced and transmitters that are produced in portions of the brain that influence our behavior and our feelings. Any other questions? Oh, Leona, you're muted. Oh, you're still muted. That never happens.
There we go. How's that? Sorry. Yeah, no other, we've got some really nice comments from folks, but no other questions that I can see. Somebody really appreciated, Mabina really appreciated your breakdown on the books. So I think she's attempted to read, and so you doing a bit of a recap has been helpful.
Thanks, Babina. Atomic Habits is a really big, thick book. It's really worth having kind of as a textbook. But I just subscribed to James Clear's email. You could kind of Google James Clear and Atomic Habits, because he has this 30-day little mini course where he kind of walks us through using each of those little aspects of Atomic Habits. So actually, it's really useful. So try to Google that, James Clear. Maybe I could share the link as well. I'll send it to Leon. Maybe somehow we can put that in our resources. But obviously he's trying to promote his book, but actually it makes a really challenging book really practical. But the super practical book is Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, because you could put that into practice right away. It's really, really good. And Atomic Habits, if you do that free 30-day course, which is trying to sell his book, but you can get it from the library. But it actually walks you through and makes it really straightforward.
That seems to be it. Oh, Mabina shared the link to the Atomic Habits website.
Okay, great.
I think
probably atomichabits.com. But it might give the link to the 30-day course. Thanks. Good. Thank you for your time and enthusiasm. And hopefully no one had sleep apnea and fell asleep.
I just put the link to our Empowering Patients page that has our upcoming talks, including the registration links. So check them out, see if the topics are of interest to you, and you can register today. And all the materials, the presentation, and the key points document for tonight's talk are already on the site. So they're all there.
I think I'm showing our Empowering Patients page, and you can meet with Leon and I next month, because next month is Heart Month. So I'll go over everything you should know about heart disease. We all should know about that. So you know about family history, about what different types of heart disease and what we can do to prevent heart disease, and what to do if you have symptoms of heart disease. And then March is one of my favorite presentations, where we kind of go over all those symptoms that doctors ask about with complete physicals, but of course we don't do routine complete physicals, and very few people have had any physicals during the pandemic. So these are the key symptoms that we should watch out for, that should prompt further investigation and discussion with your healthcare provider. And also the screening tests that we need at different ages depending on our gender. So some of you might be missing these, and those of you that don't have family doctors, it's really important to know these tests so that you can ask a walk-in doctor to tell them that you haven't had the stool test for hidden blood to screen for colon cancer for the last 3 years, so they can give you a requisition so you can get that done. And then in April, healthy eating. So another opportunity to create new healthy habits, where I do talk about some dietary things like intermittent fasting. So do visit the page and watch the videos that are also listed there. Actually, a whole bunch of videos. So yeah, you could spend the whole weekend watching that if there's nothing on Netflix or Disney Plus.
So this talk will be up on the website. The recording of this talk will be up on the website tomorrow.
Okay, and thanks again, Leona, for putting this all together.
Oh, my
And
pleasure.
she was just playing with that mute button because she's the master of our IT. So she's just teasing us. And have a good evening and a healthy and happy 2022, everyone.
You too. And when we close out this talk, actually, there will be a few questions, a survey question, so you can provide us some information, feedback on our talk tonight. So if you can fill that out, that'd be great. Excellent. Thanks, Sheena. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.